Hey everybody, it's Beth. Welcome to Infinite Garden. This week I want to talk about the concept of middle age. I've noticed the last 2 weeks I've seen a number of high-profile articles being published on the topic. I've been reading them and I wanted to talk about that with you. If that sounds good to you, please stay tuned. There were 3 pieces that caught my attention the most. One is from The Guardian, one from the BBC's Science magazine, and then one from Bloomberg. I've mentioned on this channel before, I do subscribe to Apple News, which gives me access to all kinds of different news sources, which I really enjoy, and I found all of these through that particular service. The Guardian article is interesting because it describes midlife as a disappearing life stage. The article states that in the past we used to understand midlife as occurring between the ages of 40 and 60, but now the upper end of the range seems to be expanding up into the 70s. Another detail is that those in their 40s, those who hit 40, don't necessarily feel as though they've hit midlife yet. The article interviews one person who is 40 but does not feel as though their life has the stability that we associate with midlife. Midlife has been associated with a period of time in the past where maybe you have your home and your family and your career and you're settling into a more quiet and stable period of your life. This article is saying that folks in their early 40s may not feel that way yet, and also that those of us in our 40s, myself included, I'm 44, that those of us can look at our careers and look into the future and see them changing and maybe see the need to retool. So rather than settling into a career that we expect to have unchanged for the next 20 to 30 years, we are looking ahead and seeing more education, retooling, more training on the horizon, and that this alters the experience of midlife from previous generations. One of the most interesting parts of the Guardian article, in my opinion, involves the experience of women in midlife. In previous iterations of the midlife trope or kind of stereotypes, those stereotypes largely centered around the male experience of having a, age-related midlife crisis, and then, the stereotype is that that man would then divorce his first wife and then marry a younger woman and then live some sort of different kind of faster-paced lifestyle. This article notes that women, as compared to men, go through a profound physiological change, which is menopause. Most women, of course, not all women go through that, or women might have early menopause, but generally speaking, women in midlife will experience menopause. Menopause, of course, can come at any time. It's not uncommon for women to experience it in their 30s through their 50s. So menopause for women becomes decoupled from an age or from a number. The woman's experience in society of going through menopause in midlife drastically changes her negotiations with our society at large and her function in society. Of course, men experience physiological changes too in midlife. That this article points to the fact that one gentleman couldn't drink as much alcohol as he did when he was younger, and that was kind of forcing him into a healthier lifestyle that he was associating with his midlife experience. I thought that was very interesting too. The Guardian article is very recent, and so it includes a note about Madonna's recent appearance at the Grammys. I follow Madonna on Instagram and have for a long time, so I've been, familiar with her current appearance for a long time, but I know a lot of people were shocked when they saw it. I think it's really interesting that people are offended by Madonna's choice to alter her appearance to appear younger. I'll say this, if Madonna did feel early in her career as though she needed to get plastic surgery to maintain a youthful appearance in order to continue her career, if she felt that way, I can understand why. I've watched the music industry this whole time. I can see the coercive pressure it would put on its stars. And if Madonna wanted to continue her creative experiments and making the music that she makes, I can see how she felt like she didn't have a choice but to go forward with plastic surgery. Of course, everybody has a choice. I'm just saying I can see the predicament that she was in, and I can understand why she went the way she went. The BBC also published an article about midlife with an angle about how one can learn to accept it. The article introduced me to a new term. It's an acronym. It's MAMIL, which stands for middle-aged men in Lycra. This points to the groups of men that might suit up in gear and go on long cycling trips together. This, of course, is very healthy both in terms of like social connection and activity, but of course it's also great to see folks continuing to seek out physical activity. It's really critical in midlife, of course. This article talks about the difference also between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. And it says that fluid intelligence is something that all folks start to see a diminishing of during their 20s. This is your ability to learn new things. I've also heard it referred to as neuroplasticity. This is not my area of expertise, but I do like to read on this. So this I've heard referred to in that way as well. It also points to the fact that there is something called crystallized intelligence. So this is everything that we learn and store, that we build up over a lifetime. And this can be highly valuable. This is, I guess, what some people would refer to as wisdom that comes with age. So this would be beneficial both in relationships, if you are developing healthy relationships, as well as your career if you're developing expertise, and that as we get through midlife, we may be at the peak of our crystallized intelligence. This article makes the point that for the folks that they have interviewed and the outreach they did in support of this article, that people over 40 that they talk to seem to be happier and healthier and wiser than they've ever been versus over the hill and entering into some sort of depressive midlife state. The Bloomberg article focused on how millennials are entering into midlife. Millennials have been pushing into 40 now for a number of years, and we're beginning to have enough, of a cohort there to start to understand patterns. What this article looked at was in many ways, economic conditions of early 40s millennials. Many of them do feel as though they're somewhat behind. They have less savings compared to Gen X at the same point in that generation. A lot of them are coming up against unaffordable housing prices. They may just now be having their children. They may find themselves in a position where the old stereotype of buying a fancy motorcycle or some other sort of extravagance might not even be realistic. This article suggests the coining of a term rather than a midlife crisis, a midlife crossroads. And it suggests that millennials may be more likely to engage in travel and fitness in their 40s rather than potentially blowing up their lives in search of everlasting youth. What the Bloomberg article suggests is that midlife for millennials may be about a quiet and constant reimagining of what midlife means versus some sort of dramatic reaction. For context, I'm 44, I was born in 1978. I consider myself Gen X. I am very close to being a millennial, but I energetically and sort of pop culturally align with Gen X more than I do with millennials. And my generation, Gen X, has been in midlife for quite some time. At 44, I'm one of the younger Gen X cohort members. What I'm noticing personally about my own experience in the early days of my midlife are that I'm really enjoying what I see as my increased autonomy and independence. I personally have experienced greater stability in my midlife than I did in my 20s and 30s, which aligns with the classic patterns that we're used to hearing about for midlife, so I can relate to that very much. I also have the great good blessing of having good health. That's just something that I am lucky for and thank my lucky stars for every single day. So for me right now, I know that this is a critical period of time for me to monitor my health and take good care of myself. It's something that I've had renewed focus on. So the article that was talking about how some folks can't drink as much as they used to, I totally can relate to that. I'm really limiting my sugar intake, alcohol intake, really amping up my fruits and vegetables, that type of thing. The things that you're supposed to be doing, I'm trying to do those. I'm also more aware than ever of how much time is left, like how much water is under the bridge. One of the big differences between me maybe 10 years ago and now is that I feel like I can feel the weight of my life at this point. My life experience starts to feel not necessarily like a burden, but I can feel the gravitas of a life already lived. At this stage in the game, I've had a pretty long career. I'm in a very happy second marriage. I've owned several homes. I've lived in several states. Just a lot has gone down, and I can appreciate that I've learned a lot. And when I speak to people who are kind of earlier in their lives and listening to the way they perceive the way the world is going to unfold for them, I do feel as though I hold a little like glowing ball of wisdom about how weird life can be and how much it can change and how little control we have over so much of what happens in life. I really feel as though that's a lesson that I have learned, and I'm attributing that to midlife. And in looking forward to my future, I have a different outlook than I did when I was younger. It feels less unwritten in some ways. We'll see how it goes. I love the concept of embracing middle age and focusing on relationships, travel, fitness. I love that. I completely relate to that and feel like that's sort of where my head is these days. I was also very interested in the concept of the Guardian article about the retooling for a new career in midlife, how that's something that the current cohort is doing. I wanted to point out an excellent video by another Silver Sister creator here, Tessie. Her channel is called Unfolding with Grace. Earlier this month, she uploaded a really great video talking about how she is starting on a new career path at this chapter in life. In this video, she describes her experience of applying for and going through interviews for a position, kind of an entry-level position in a completely different field than she's been working in, that she built her whole career in, starting over again. I thought her video was wonderful to watch. Tessie is an example of someone in, I think, the Gen X cohort who is retooling and pushing through the fear and continuing on with her career. I highly recommend checking out her video. I enjoyed it very, very much. I want to hear from you. I have a couple of questions. You don't have to answer any of these. You can share your own advice, but I just wanted to hear if you have a particular response to the term middle age versus midlife. Is there one that you prefer? I also want to know if you yourself had a major career change or some kind of retooling in midlife that opened up new paths for you. Do you feel as though you have explored new fitness activities or have explored your health differently? Do you feel like 40 to 60 is too tight a band for the concept of middle age? I know I personally do. I think 60 is way too low these days. Finally, do you think the concept of a midlife crisis is outdated or potentially gendered? Have you seen that play out in your own life, either with your own impulse to change your life or the impulse of those around you? Please check in with me in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. This was a lot of food for thought for me this week, and I really wanted to talk with you all about it. I hope you're all doing well out there, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Talk soon.